Hello, and welcome to another episode of Casing the Cover, the podcast where we cheated on our homework. I'm Mary, and with me, as always, is my co-host Jen. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
You gotta do it again. Nope.
No, it got it on my end, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, Zoom doesn't like it when you do that.
I don't care if Zoom doesn't like it when I do that.
So, we're cheating again. We brought our book club books.
We didn't cheat. This is because we love the book club. The book club is fun. We're meeting all kinds of interesting people at book club and learning that adaptations do not always hold up to the original.
Or maybe they do because Romeo and Juliet sucks.
Okay, that's fair. That is a fair assessment. I will go with that one. I also don't just want to talk about our books. I do want to kind of talk about what some of the other people mentioned in the book club about theirs.
I agree. So this month was Romeo and Juliet.
Yes.
Which I initially picked because it was kind of, romancy for February, and then realized that we preceded it by Cinderella and are following it with The Myth of Spring, which isn't really a romance. It's just been turned into a romance. So I think that's okay.
Well, this isn't really a romance either. So I think it's
a tragedy.
Yeah, we're going downhill on the whole romance thing. So it's just getting darker and darker.
And then we're going to do Sherlock Holmes, which can also be interpreted as a romance. Yes. Lots of people ship Sherlock and Watson.
Yes.
So we did Romeo and Juliet, again, probably because it has a lot of adaptations. It has a lot of influence on a lot of things. It is my least favorite Shakespeare play, including the ones I haven't read. I hate Romeo and Juliet with a passion. And I've read, I don't know how much Shakespeare you've done in your time. Probably a decent amount.
Quite a lot, actually, yes.
As have I. I haven't read all of the historical plays because there's a gazillion of them, all the King Henrys and all the King Richards and all those. I haven't read all those. I've read a few, but I feel like I've hit all his other major ones either by seeing performances or films or reading the plays or both. I've done The Tempest. I've done your Romeo and Juliet's, your Much Ado About Nothings, your Midsummer Night Dreams, your As You Like It, Hamlets and Othellos and Macbeths. And
Taming of the Shrew.
My favorite Shakespeare plays, I really like Merchant of Venice, and I really like Much Ado About Nothing. They're probably my favorite. Much Ado About Nothing is my absolute favorite. I love it so much.
I feel like the reason why Shakespeare stories, though, hold up is because they are kind of basic with the plot in terms of like Romeo and Juliet. What is the basic plot of Romeo and Juliet? It's teenagers being stupid and falling in love with people they probably shouldn't and disobeying their parents. And it's like that.
Dying.
And then dying. Which, by the way, that is a major plot point in Romeo and Juliet. And yes, it should be a tragedy. There should not be a happy ending to Romeo and Juliet. Somebody's got to die.
In the case of mine, it wasn't really either a happy ending or a tragedy. It was kind of just, it was
You want to start with yours?
We can start with mine if you want. So what we noticed going around the circle for book club is that at least half of the ones we did, they were happy endings.
Yeah.
Except for the ones that people hadn't finished and that we don't know how they end.
Or can't finish in the case of mine because it's a friggin' two-parter.
Well, yours and our friend Amelie, who has been a previous guest on this podcast.
Yes.
Hers was also a two-parter, which also hers sounded like the best one. We all want to read it now.
Yeah, and I just want to say I fully judged that one not by the cover for the story, but by the cover for her. So she writes fantasy and when I say fantasy, like weird, wild mermaids and demons and things like that. And she is very much into that sort of thing too. And so I picked a book with a book cover with flowery lettering and looked like a magic circle kind of thing. And yes, and I got all of that right. And she was very happy.
So that's exactly what that book was too.
So sometimes you're not judging the book by the cover for the story. You're judging it by who you're picking it for.
Right. And we kind of conceived this book club so that people could read things with similar themes, tropes, and story elements, but within whatever genre they were interested
in their playground. Yes.
And then our dear friend Deb just watched Romeo and Juliet.
That's because because she tried to read a super pretentious
Choose Your Own Adventure.
Choose Your Own Adventure of Romeo and Juliet, written by a dude who apparently is a giant prick and is not afraid to talk about how he's a giant prick.
They had like a weird forward where they were like bragging about how smart they were, but it like was maybe in context. I don't know. It seemed like he was trying to be Lemony Snicket, but not as clever, was kind of the vibe I got from it.
Yeah.
These are all the books we didn't read.
I know, I'm like, these are the books we didn't read, but these are the ones. Oh, and then of course the one that is the massive point of contention was Kim read the Romeo and Juliet and Vampires, and all of the foreshadowing bad things that should have happened never happened.
Yeah, which actually I feel happened in my book as well. So I guess it's a good segue.
That's a good segue. We'll go with that.
So I read Verona Comics, which when we were initially putting together the book list for Romeo and Juliet, you know, you're looking up modern interpretations of Romeo and Juliet and things that had Romeo and Juliet and the keyword searches, things like that. This one did not come up at first. It took some digging to find this one because like nothing about it, I don't think in its marketing specifically tells you it's a modern Romeo and Juliet, but it's called Verona Comics. So if you know anything about Romeo and Juliet, even if you've tried to shove that knowledge out of your brain,
takes place in fair Verona.
Takes place in Verona, right. So Verona Comics is about two teenagers, of course they're teenagers, because that's the thing about Romeo and Juliet. They're fucking teenagers, and they're dumb teenagers. They are Romeo and Juliet, but they are from competing comic book stores, sort of. So the Romeo belongs to a family that basically owns a giant comic book chain that's eating up all these little indie shops. And then the Juliet equivalent, her parents own a little comic book store and her stepmother is an indie artist. So that is the warring homes. So here is the summary real quick. I'm going to read this real quick. From the author of Hot Dog Girl, I found that interesting. Apparently the author wrote a book called Hot Dog Girl, comes a fresh and funny queer YA contemporary novel about two teens who fall in love in an indie comic book shop, now available in paperback. The queer thing, we're going to touch on that too. Jubilee has it all together. She's an elite cellist, and when she's not working in her stepmom's indie comic shop, she's prepping for the biggest audition of her life. Ridley is barely holding it together. His parents own the biggest comic book chain in the country, and Ridley can't stop disappointing them. That is, when they're even paying attention. They meet one fateful night at a comic convention prom, and the two can't help falling for each other. Too bad their parents are at each other's throats every chance they get, making a relationship between them nearly impossible, unless they can manage to keep it a secret. Then again, the feud between their families may be the least of their problems. As Ridley's anxiety spirals, Jubilee tries to help but finds her focus torn between her fast approaching audition and her intensifying relationship. What if love can't conquer all? What if each of them needs more than the other can give? So it's obviously Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
But it's nerdy Romeo and Juliet. And from what little I know about the author, she is also a comic book writer. She writes some of her own graphics as well. She describes herself as a writer, geek, and romantic. I don't know if it was for the sake of the reader or if it's because she was being lazy, but I feel like a lot of the comic book references we get in this book are very surface level. Like, and this is a point of contention, of course, because we are geeks. Most every comic book reference in this is to like major DC and major like Marvel properties. And that's about as far as it gets, other than referring to the fake in-universe comic series that Jubilee's stepmom writes. That's the only thing mentioned in this book that's not DC or Marvel.
Which is probably based on whatever the author is actually writing as a comic series.
Maybe. I didn't look that far into it.
Oh, I would have looked into that.
But so when they meet at the Comic-Con prom, which is the equivalent of, you know, the ball where Romeo and Juliet meet, our story in Fair Verona, he's dressed like Batman and she's dressed in a costume that's supposed to be her stepmom's character. Her best friend wins the costume contest with a Harley Quinn outfit. No.
Okay.
And then
that would never happen.
His name is Ridley, which is, you know, alien. That's about as far off from the mainstream trail we get in the story. She is Jubilee, which is of course from X-Men. His sister's name is Grayson, as in Dick Grayson, which is also Batman. They vet him by asking him who his favorite Robin is in the Batman universe. And then she at one point asks him to pick out a book that he would recommend to her, a comic he'd recommend to her, and he picks like Captain Marvel or something. It's all very mainstream comic books.
Yeah.
No other fandom in this. So there's that. I'm not going to go on a nerdy rant. Let's talk about the cover. So the cover, it's a cute cover. I like the cover. Part of the reason why I picked it up. And I feel like I feel like the cover is pretty honest for what it is. It looks like a graphic novel cover. It's this very artsy style to it.
Yeah, it looks like comic book.
It looks like or like a graphic novel cover or something like that. It's these two teenagers standing in front of a comic book front that says Verona Comics, which is her parents' comic book store. They're, standing on opposite sides. She's wearing red, he's wearing yellow. I
like though that the door says they're falling for the competition.
Yeah, which is basically that's the warring families, right? They're rival. Yeah. His dad's company is trying to take down all the indie stores and wants to buy out Verona Comics. And what he does is when he finds out that his son has some sort of connection to this girl, they establish kind of early on that Ridley, so our Romeo equivalent, has a lot of anxiety problems. He's tried to kill himself. His Rosalind in this version is a boy, which is as queer as their relationship gets. I'll go into that a little bit more because I'm kind of disappointed with how they represented it. Yeah, this queer romance between two queer people in a heteronormative relationship, which there's some elements of that are a little problematic. They establish him as suicidal. He's tried to commit suicide. It kind of wrecked his family. So this is kind of his first opportunity to kind of get back in with his dad and with his family. He does it by telling his dad, I met this girl. She's so-and-so's stepdaughter, which he learns through a series of happenstances, basically. Mm-hmm. He doesn't know it at first. They don't know that who they're talking to at first. He goes to meet this artist, sees her there. She never sees his face in person because he was wearing this Batman mask. And so he finds out who she is and tells his dad, and his dad sends him to spy on her. So he's texting her as the guy she met at the comic book convention while also coming into her shop as Ridley. They get to know each other in both ways, and he knows all of it and she doesn't know any of it.
This is like Cyrano and Romeo and Juliet.
Kind of.
Is it Taming of the Shrew? Is the one where they kind of convince him to go. It's that whole thing of go hook up with the girl, but don't really.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of thing going on, which is also in everything.
They call each other Bats and Peak because she was dressed like a peacock and he was dressed like Batman. It's really stupid. I hate the nicknames. When he finally admits all of this to her, she's really mad. They get over it. They get back into a relationship, and then it kind of is Romeo and Juliet. They do the balcony scene where her cat got out and he finds her cat and he brings it to the balcony or whatever. Things start to slowly fall apart. He gets to know her family because they don't know who he is. He knows that he's going to screw it all up. He basically confronts his dad and tells him he's not going to do it anymore. And his dad basically throws him out. And so he goes to her and steals his sister car and they run off together, which is, our Romeo and Juliet running away together. And you would think that because they established him as kind of someone with anxiety and depression and suicidal, they would take the actual tragic Romeo and Juliet ending route. But instead, they get in a car accident. They're both fine and they break up, and her arm is messed up so she can't play the cello, and he goes to rehab. Then everything works out and they kind of get back together, but not really. They kind of they meet again at the end, and there's kind of this hint that they're not ready yet, but maybe eventually they'll be able to renew this relationship.
What?
Yeah. So the ending kind of falls apart for me. The other thing that falls apart for me is that they never really take these characters very far character development wise, which again is an issue with Romeo and Juliet because they have no character development in Romeo and Juliet, right?
Right.
They're just two dumb teenagers who fall in love and then let everything else go to hell. And I guess in order to make Romeo and Juliet work as a story, you kind of have to have two dumb teenagers that don't give a shit about consequences, because otherwise there's no consequences, because it's a very avoidable situation unless you're being stupid about it. I kind of get that to a degree, but they present Jubilee as pretty level-headed until she gets in this relationship, and then she just lets it all go to fuck. She stops caring about school and her cello, and just gets in this car with her suicidal boyfriend, doesn't give a shit, doesn't tell her parents or lies to her parents about where she's going, even though he's clearly unstable. It's once again, you just have to acknowledge that she's stupid. But at the beginning of the book, she tells him I would choose me over you. I would choose my future over a relationship. And then she just throws that out the window.
Yeah. And then she doesn't do that.
The other thing is, of course, the fact that they present this as, I even said in the advertising, a queer version of Romeo and Juliet. This is not a same-sex couple. They are two people who identify as queer, but the most you hear about it is that she feels that she is attracted to women as well, but she's never been in a relationship with anybody but another man. And she did the same thing with that guy, throw away everything about her life except for that relationship. And the only same-sex relationship either one of them has had is he had with his Rosalind, but that character equivalent blackmailed him and took pictures of them together and was going to sell them to the newspaper.
Oh my gosh.
Instead of the Rosalind being someone he pursued and then blew off, it's someone who betrayed him. So the only same-sex partner either of these characters have is a villain.
Yeah, that.
And so that kind of gave me, her best friend is also gay and she has a girlfriend, but the girlfriend's never on screen at the same time. And then her parents' mom is married to another woman. It's her stepmom, but they also don't have a lot of interactions together. She's almost always interacting with her stepmom, not her mom. I feel like they wanted this to be a queer version of Romeo and Juliet, but take out as much of it as they could and make it very surface level, make it very heteronormative for a queer story, kind of just push all the queer characters to the sidelines as much as they could. They could have taken the element so much further, and they could have developed both these characters a lot more. And there's parts of it where like the Juliet character Jubilee says, you know, hey, they have this whole conversation about being queer and both being attracted to both genders, and he identifies as bi and she doesn't know how to identify. And that's as far as that character development goes, is they have this conversation that they both kind of leave like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much more that could have been done with that.
When they're together, I mean, I guess they are still.
Yeah. Well, the two characters are queer characters, but it's not a queer retelling of Romeo and Juliet. Like, there is obviously, just statistically, if you are someone who is bi or pan, you date people of multiple genders, you are statistically more likely to end up with somebody that's an opposite gender of you, because there's just more straight people than there are queer people. So like, that's fine, but I just feel like they didn't do enough for these characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they didn't develop that side of them.
And I feel like this author, you know, there's an article with her talking about making a queer version of Romeo and Juliet, and it's like, you could make a version of Romeo and Juliet where they are a same-sex couple. I'm sure one exists.
I'm sure. We did not catch that one, though. We did not find that one.
And I feel like even in this setting, you could have made it a same-sex Romeo and Juliet.
Where
your Juliet comes from a family with the same-sex parents, and they're very open and they're fine with her or him being in a same-sex couple. But maybe the Romeo equivalent isn't. He comes from this really, like, you know, straight-laced, really conservative family who cares about his image and is really upset that he was in a previous relationship with a guy. You could have made that part of it.
You mean like my Cinderella story did? And it did it well until it fell apart at the end because they put a bad ending.
Except in your version of Cinderella, both of the families were okay with him being gay, but he just didn't want to be.
He didn't think his family was. I don't know. But either way, the only reason that book fell apart was because the ending was so rushed together. It had nothing to do with how they represented people and their relationships and the spectrum of relationships that was in those stories. We just ran to the end. Yeah, this does not feel like it did it well.
No, like, I feel like the setup for this book was okay, and then it kind of just went a lot of nowhere. I don't feel like he ends up going to like fancy rehab, and his sister pays all his bills, and like he gets away from his abusive dad, and his sister still gets to keep all her money, and she still gets to go to her college. Like, everything wraps up perfectly for them, which is fine for a YA novel, not great for Romeo and Juliet.
Right. Like, and I have read some YA novels that, like, dark, man. They go dark.
Yeah, that's totally a thing right now too. There's lots of tragic YA novels.
I would like to harken back to The Grace Year, which would have made an excellent example of a adaptation leaning into the Romeo and Juliet. All of our people listening, go back and listen to that one. And yes, that has tragedy and badness. Feels more Romeo and Juliet than this.
The star-crossed lovers of this was a little surface level.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like if they had leaned more into it being a queer retelling of Romeo and Juliet. I also understand, like, maybe you don't want to do like a queer version of Romeo and Juliet where everyone dies, because that's not great either.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
If you're going to go with they both come out of it and maybe the relationship didn't work out, but they both come out of it realizing they need to be there for themselves.
Yes.
That could have also been a good way to handle it.
Yes. But I agree, like, killing them all would have probably not gone okay.
But they also didn't do that. So.
Right.
And they also put a suicidal Romeo in here that then didn't try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
He just was trying to turn his car around and got hit by a random person.
Yeah. That sounds like a whole lot of amping people up for something that's going to happen. It's like, it's not foreshadowing if you don't actually follow through.
Right. And again, like, I don't know necessarily that we want to have a bunch of suicide in YA novels, but then maybe don't put that in there.
Right.
Don't bring it up.
Don't bring it up if it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah. And I guess that's where, like, I feel like this book set up a lot of things that could have been conflicts and then just kind of went, oh, is this a conflict? Nah. Is this a conflict? No, not really. How about this one? No. Car accident. Everybody's fine now. The end.
Yeah, I'm out.
So it's really pretty looking book. And I like the idea of, you know, the nerdy Romeo and Juliet. And I like the idea of doing a queer Romeo and Juliet. I just think this kind of was trying to do too much and didn't follow through on enough of what it set up.
Or any of what it set up. It tried to do too much and did none of it instead.
Yeah, a little bit.
Which, I mean, those probably could relate to the Romeo character.
It wasn't geeky enough, it wasn't queer enough, and it wasn't Romeo and Juliet enough.
It was not enough.
Not tragic enough.
Not tragic enough. Mine, I don't know if it's going to be tragic or not, but I have high hopes and I'm going for the second book.
You haven't finished yours.
I did finish mine.
Finish the first one. Okay.
I finished the first one, but obviously I can't. The second one, I guess, just came out like months ago. I don't know exactly when it came out. Mine was called These Violent Delights, and the second book is called Our Violent Ends. Obviously, that is a Shakespeare quote.
You're going to read that book, that Violent Ends thing, and then they're all going to live happily ever after. You're going to be so pissed.
You know what? Screw it. When I find that book on a shelf, I'm going to flip to the end and I'm going to read the end because I will not waste my time. Too old for this crap. I do not need to waste my life on bad books. But yes, I fell in love with the cover of mine because it felt very Shakespeare.
Trailer.
I get trailers again.
No more book trailers.
No more book trailers. Hang on, but it's moving. In 1920s Shanghai, the city abounds with mayhem and revelry.
Better book trailer.
Dude, save their city's future. Ooh, stabby. Okay, that was my talk through of the book trailer.
It looks Romeo and Juliet. It's got like a dragon and roses on a saber or something.
Yes. So mine is Romeo and Juliet in 1920s Shanghai. It definitely leans into the whole violent gangs. So it's a Chinese gang versus a Russian gang. Juliet is Juliet Kai of the Chinese mafia, and she is the heiress to this mafia. And then Roma Montagov is the Romeo, and he is in the Russian mafia. And it shows the very different like lifestyles that they have. So like the Kai family is much more structured and about lineage, and it's about kind of this almost royalty sort of thing where like we're about money and we're about power and we're about culture, whereas the Russian mafia is more about who will kick your ass and put you in your place, and they're the new boss, that kind of thing. I'm getting this feeling of like they're both trying to throw off that dynamic in their individual gangs. So it's Romeo and Juliet in 1920s Shanghai. That alone has a ton of potential. And then there's monsters.
I feel like more Romeo and Juliet needs monsters.
I haven't figured out exactly. They know what it is. 3, 2, 1 spoilers. It's an insect that is like crawling into people's brains and making them go crazy, and then they rip their throats out.
Yeah.
Like it's squishy. I really liked this for like when it said Violent Delights, I'm like, we went all in with the blood. We went for it. Not afraid. Also, this is a really young author. She's 23 and this is her debut novel, and she is unafraid to go for the gore.
Good for her.
I think it's great. I'm all for that.
I'm just being bitter because I'm getting old. It's fine.
Well, hey, my debut novel like didn't hit this big, so and I was in my late 20s when that happened. So, and now I still don't have a big novel, and I'm 20 years older than her. Anyway, enough of that. That's enough of that. That's the true tragedy of this podcast. Anyway, Violent Delights. Again, the font is brilliant. It feels edgy, but also of a time, and also kind of feels like it's cut into the book cover. There is a sword, there is roses, which also are very symbolic for Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And then there's the Chinese Emperor Dragon. So okay, well, it gives you that, like, hey, this is Shanghai and Chinese stuff and things like that. So you got that too in there. And so the story for them starts kind of after their romance. So Juliet and Romeo got together when she was like 15 or something like that, same as in the regular story. And she is sent to America because there's this big explosion that apparently Roma was the one that figured out like how to get past security and stuff at the Kai mansion. So everybody thinks that, it was his idea to blow up the mansion and all this stuff, and all these people are killed. So sort of hates him. And so she goes to America, comes back. She's supposed to be learning how to take over the gang and all this stuff. All these different things are happening while the city is being overrun with this madness that is happening. So the two of them kind of set aside their rivalry in order to figure out how to fix this problem. My hope is that the second book, Our Violent Ends, is going to end with like the both of them sacrificing themselves in some way to save the city.
You need a tragic ending.
Because we need a tragic ending. And yet that is a value. I think it holds true to the Romeo and Juliet story of like, because they killed themselves and their parents saw how stupid this whole thing was, they kind of like fix things or it's settled down. I don't want to actually believe that at the end of Romeo and Juliet, everything worked out hunky-dory for the Capulets and the Montagues. I think after like, I'll give it 6 months and they started killing each other again.
They just get scolded by authority and calm down for a little bit.
Yeah, like I think that's kind of how that went. But I feel like in this one, it could be that they sacrificed themselves for their city, for Shanghai.
Solving a greater problem than we don't get along.
Right. I feel like that would be a really great way to end this. So I am going to spoil it for myself. I am going to grab that book the next time I see it, and I am going to flip to the end and I'm going to read that. And if it is not how it ends, you will never hear me speak of this again.
You could just look up the ending online, Jen.
I'm not even sure if I can yet because it's still really new and a lot of that doesn't leak yet.
You can look on Goodreads. I'm sure someone put it in a review on Goodreads.
You think so? I don't know. All right. I won't spoil it today though. We'll revisit this. But I do think that it stays very true. I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt for now because so far everything is really kind of sticking to, I don't know, the essence of the story. They might kill each other at any moment also. And it goes back to like what their romance was like. So like they had this really hot and heavy romance. Lots of people did die. She got sent to America. And she goes on and on about how like that Juliet is dead. That person doesn't exist anymore. So I think in some ways holding on to some of the tragedy of it, but now they're kind of like different characters almost.
Yours almost feels like it's Romeo and Juliet that have grown up and become, what is it, Benedict and Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. Who are now hate each other and think each other are assholes, don't get along anymore and are bitter about it. That's basically what those characters are in Much Ado About Nothing. They're bitter exes.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, mine is the bitter ex version of Romeo and Juliet. Either they're going to try to get back. I do feel like they're getting back together. You can feel that happening in this book. They're getting back together, but I'm hoping that they're getting back together is going to end horribly. Isn't that a terrible
you're such
thing?
An optimist. Well, here's the thing. We were running this at the book club too. We're all like, every time someone would say, and then my version ends up happy, we're like, are you freaking kidding me?
We're so mad.
It's like, this is an adaptation of a tragedy. There's too many happy endings going on here.
Yes. And it's true. Like, this is not meant to be a happy thing. So why would you be happy if it has a good ending? Like, it's not supposed to be that.
But I feel like a lot of people just take the star-crossed lovers thing and then just skip the tragedy.
They're not star-crossed if they're no tragedy.
I'll tell you, Jen.
I don't like it, Mary. I don't like it at all. I need death and murder and destruction. And I got to tell you, Violent Delights definitely delivered on that.
Oh, good. See, at least you got some of that.
Definitely delivered on the let's throw some blood around, let's kill some people and be unafraid of that. Because in like the first, 10 pages, I don't even think it was that many pages. There was death in the first couple pages. It was like, there is blood and a lot of it. And then there's more. And then there's like gang warfare, but also monsters killing people. And like, this is just fantastic. Shanghai's not a very big place. You keep at this rate, you're not going to have anybody left anyway.
So I found, I'm just going to read this to you.
Oh no.
I don't think it has spoilers, but I figure you'll appreciate this. This is a review of the second book. I am an empty shell of my former self. Chloe, you're paying my therapy bills. This is the second time in my life that I've been this heartbroken over a book. Literally, it was a full out sob fest for me reading this. I don't think I will ever truly recover, and really, I should have known better, but of course, I foolishly hope. My heart has been stomped on, torn into pieces, and thrown into an explosion. I actually wasn't expecting to be this heartbroken. Like, why did I go ahead and fall in love with every single one of these characters? I was literally setting myself up for pain.
Okay, I'm reading the second book. I really hope that person does not understand Romeo and Juliet.
Well, they probably do. That's why they said they got their hopes up. They knew better to get their hopes up, but they did anyway.
Yes. Okay, so Chloe Gong, you understood the assignment. Well done. This is Romeo and Juliet. It is violent. It is awful. It should be tragic. Thank you. I'm going to read the second book. And you know I don't read a lot of sequels. I do not have time to read sequels. Mary's like digging.
Is there actually a character in this book named Benedict?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. That's not from Romeo and Juliet. That's from Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, but he's not.
I know, but I think she read both plays, is my point.
Possibly. I'm sure she read a lot of them. Also, she's 23. She went to university. Those plays are fresh in her brain. You know, if she's a writing or a English major, she definitely, all those plays are fresh in her brain. So she's probably taking, in fact, maybe these books are her taking it out on like all of the trash that she had to go through for college.
Just taking it and running with it.
Yeah, taking it, running with it, and making it bleed all over the place so that this is her therapy. I'm all in for that.
Well, that's like so Ollie's book, I cannot remember the title of it. Shattered something or other. I don't know what it was called. But hers was like post-apocalyptic zombie Romeo and Juliet, but like post Romeo and Juliet.
Oh,
where,
yes.
Like they've already done the tragic death scene and the story takes place from like side characters.
Yes,
who are
Rosalind,
experiencing the aftermath.
It's Rosalind and the priest? No,
Paris.
Paris. Rosalind and Paris are like running the show after Juliet has killed herself and then been necromanced back. Yeah, Romeo is pissed about the whole thing. And I just, yes,
Sounds
I'm all
good.
in.
We're all gonna read that one.
We're all gonna read that one. So, and that one too, it didn't speak as a Romeo and Juliet. The cover itself, I don't know how you found that one as Romeo and Juliet, because it doesn't really, it must say something on the back or something.
Yeah, I would say it was probably described in the description somewhere that it is some sort of retelling, or because she's called the Juliet, or just those keywords being in the description probably pulled it up for us.
Yeah, but like the cover just looks like any dark fantasy.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of all dark fantasies right now kind of have that like flowers and swords and all that kind of thrown on the cover. Your book obviously did as well.
Yeah, but I think mine, the flowers and swords, was about Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
that
but
was
it's also kind of a trait of dark fantasy novels right now. They all kind of look like the Shadow and Bone covers kind of look like that too, and like that's kind of the way that fantasy looks right now.
Yeah, everything's got kind of the sharp but flowy font
and kind of dark, like a lot of times like they'll have like, especially on the hardcovers, the hardbacks, they'll have like gold like tinting or silver on some of them, like metallic tinting on stuff, on the objects on the cover. Or I
am excited for next month. And I'm also I probably won't talk about my book though unless I talk about all the book covers, because I'm reading Phantom of the Opera. So maybe I'll do a comparison on all those book covers. We haven't done a classics book cover thing in a while.
So which one you think is the most inspired? We're doing we're kind of going loosey goosey next month. We wanted to do like Hades and Persephone mythology mostly because it's kind of a hot one to adapt right now.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's a hot one to adapt by like indie authors, so we don't have a lot of that available to us like through the library collection. But some of it is free online, like your Lore Olympuses and your Plunder Worlds and all that. They're available for free online. So they are accessible, just not easily.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of variation. Some of it is the myth of spring with, the kidnapping of Persephone. Some of their stuff of adaptations of those characters is more like the Orpheus myth and things like that. We're kind of going to go give us whatever you think fits. And in your case, you're doing Phantom of the Opera because it's, the descent into the underworld.
Yes.
Which I'm also sure shows up in a lot of mythology. So I'm also open to that. So I'm kind of interested to see what people find.
Yes. Also, like if we do have any like indie authors or anything like that listening, don't laugh, Mary.
I'm not laughing, I was blowing my nose.
That listen to us, any indie authors that listen to us, maybe if you've got one that is Myth of Spring or Hades and Persephone and you want us to see it, get it to us quickly because we read slow lately. Yeah, I don't read slow. I
already read Touch of Darkness. That's probably the one I'm going to touch on because I have a lot to say about it, especially in contrast to Lore Olympus. I mean, let's just face it. We picked Hades and Persephone so I could make everyone read Lore Olympus, the extent of it.
Yeah, but will they? Because
probably
I'm
not.
Caught up.
You've already read Lore Olympus. Well, I don't want to like spoil too much like going into that because that's probably what we're going to talk about next month. And we'll just talk about Lore Olympus because we both read it and we love it. Part of the reason why I really like Lore Olympus is because it does reimagine that story as a romance, which a lot of them do. But from what I can tell, a lot of these other versions, they reimagine it as a romance, but they still make Hades like this dark, foreboding, super possessive, really awful character. And then you get these romances with like these really toxic men. Whereas in Lore Olympus, like her ending up in the underworld, she's not kidnapped to the underworld, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
And the Hades character in that interpretation is just like a really damaged individual who like has a lot of like anxiety and is just sad, and like they find joy in each other because they understand each other because she also has all these issues. And so he's not just like this over possessive awful person. I feel like there's a tendency with retellings of that mythology to make him a really toxic lover, which I just hate that in romance in general. It's my least favorite romance trope. Don't like toxic, awful, possessive men. I just don't like it.
No. And also tragedies that don't end in tragedies.
Or just don't have them be tragedies. Like we brought up at book club, because we were joshing each other and stuff. We brought up those Hot and Badger books.
Oh,
and
yes.
how the reason why I like them is because, again, the male romantic lead in that is just like, I'll do whatever you need me to do. I'm here for you. I'm not a toxic, awful man. I'm a supportive partner. Like, oh my God.
I think
you have to read people turning into bears and badgers in order to get a male love interest that's just supportive and not toxic and controlling.
Yes. And see, you never let me talk about the Amish one that you made me read, and then we didn't do that episode.
Talk about that next month if you want.
No, because I don't. But
was
you might
it,
talk
was
about
it a Christmas
toxic.
romance?
It was Christmas. It was an
because
Amish.
we skipped Christmas episode. That's why.
I know. It's an Amish country Christmas romance, and that was like the actual title. There was so many. That was the tragedy, Mary. You made me do that.
We can talk about that next time if you want.
This is how we're ending our episode about tragic romances. Is I had to read a romance, and that's the tragedy. I've had no good luck reading romances. None.
Maybe you should be reading different romances. So we'll have more to talk about in March. This is actually our February episode. We're putting it out on the 29th of February, right?
Yes, the 29th of February. Yes.
29th of February. There's one of those this year, right? Okay, this episode's a little late, but it's not our fault. February is short.
February short, and so are we.
Yes. Yes, correct.
And so is our time.
Yep. All right. Casing the Cover is a monthly podcast where friends and library coworkers, Mary and Jen, review books, study the publishing industry, and try to unlock the secrets behind every cover. Can you judge a book by its cover? Join Mary and Jen on the case to find out. So we should probably go. We need to find books we like again. We haven't had one of those in a while. We won't next month either, because Touch of Darkness is awful.
All right. You want to call us out, Mary?
Yep, we're going to go. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for cracking another case with Mary and Jen. To learn more about Casing the Cover, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Casing the Cover. To contact us or suggest a book, email casingthecoverpod@gmail.com. New episodes of Casing the Cover release the fourth Tuesday on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher.